My friends, this is going to be like a special episode, a very special episode of Blue Review. Kind of like my sweet movie episode. Special to me because it's a film that's been with me for years, that I've written about before, had published writings put out about before, lobbied for more attention to in my limited power that I possess in the film industry. Um, but anyway, so I've come today prepared with visual aids. I took notes, and I have hopefully a wealth of information that won't overwhelm you, because I want everybody to see this movie. I want everyone to see this movie, and I think it's extremely underrated. It's not on Blu-ray yet. Doesn't look like there's any plans for a Blu-ray. It came out on this very small label on DVD. I'm going to turn off my phone so I only go marginally insane. It's not for something to drive me crazy, it's not a very far drive. So, without further ado, so it's Black Jesus, starring Woody Strode, 1968, by Maurizio Zarlini. And this little strange label called Eclectic DVD Distribution, in league with Ivy Video. This is like a postage stamp size company. Put this out on DVD. I had gotten, you guessed it, a bootleg from Video Search in Miami in the 90s. And with that copy, I reviewed it in Shock Cinema. So that's going to be today's extreme / forgotten segment. I hope you guys are doing okay. Life is pounding away at us, but we're still here. So I'm just going to share this great accomplishment of mine. This was the original ad that was in like the major newspapers when Black Jesus hit America. He who ain't with me, it's against me. And he's got that big fist. So it's like, the Black Power thing. It was kind of marketed. It came out in America in 1971. This little company named Plaza Pictures put it out. And it was rated GP. It's on the print. So, it's not extremely graphic, but I think it'd be a little heavy for a PG movie nowadays. I think it'd be a little heavy for a PG-13 movie. Just the tone itself, to quote some of those censors from the video nasty days. So I am going to read my review, perhaps embarrassingly, and trip down memory lane. Then I'm going to give you some facts about this movie and a review. So, a contemporary review, modern review. Okay, so this was in the Film Flotsam section. The readers got to review whatever they liked. And this was like, I have 5 movies I reviewed in this one, including Jorge Grau's Code of Hunting, or Hunting Ground, which I recently reviewed on a beautiful Blu-ray. So if that can come out on Blu-ray, this needs to come out on Blu-ray. Okay, so I wrote Black Jesus, Video Search in Miami as my print source, 1971. If this stark, all but forgotten Italian-made oddity was marketed as blaxploitation in the U.S., audiences must have been scratching their heads and dozing in confusion. But this slow-paced and reflective politico-religious parable featuring the late, great Woody Strode in what must have been his only top-billed role is immaculately lensed, naturalistic, and powerful, with director Valerio Zurlini embracing the same post-neorealist grit as prime Pasolini. Zurlini's Christian allegory is set in a war-torn modern Africa occupied by European forces. I'm going to elaborate on that after my review, because there's a lot of stuff I just didn't know when I wrote this. Strode plays Maurice Lalube, quote-unquote, the son of destiny. That's what his people and critics alike call him in the movie. Figurehead of a mounting uprising by native Africans, a revolutionary exponent of nonviolent resistance and a messiah of sorts, whose followers allegedly can't be touched by bullets. Sold out for 100,000 francs by a cloaked Judas, a fellow black man no less. Lalube gains a follower in prison, a white soldier, Oreste, Pasolini vet Franco Arcali. After a savage beating, when nails are pounded through his hands, Lalube is delivered over to his final fate, and Zarlini subtly answers the question of Lalube's divine nature. Strode was always criminally underused, and this lost gem is a real treat. Standout line, we are not your monkeys any longer. So, pretty heavy, very 60s, very revolutionary. So, Maurice Lalube is a thinly disguised take on the real life Patrice Lamumba, who I don't think I knew anything about when I wrote that review, and no one gave me the info, so I guess we were all kind of ignorant. As far as Patrice Lamumba goes, he was assassinated. This is like a recreation, loose recreation of his final days. Lamumba was the first prime minister of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which was run by Belgium. So this is another anti-colonialist tract, and of course I myself am anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, unabashedly, unashamedly. So, you know, Lumumba's assassination, once I got to reading about him, Lamumba, I'm combining them. Not Lalube. Maurice Lalube is the character played in Black Jesus by Woody Strode. The real man was Patrice Lamumba. Thinly veiled, like I said. Lamumba, when I learned about him, it kind of fed into, you know, what I've always said, which is you don't notice any right-wingers being assassinated for their beliefs, do you? If you can think of one, let me know. I'll wait. They're all left-wingers. They're all radicals, revolutionaries who want to improve society, affect positive change. Don't mean to get all political, but you know, you guys know I am anyway. And this movie certainly is. It is kind of a Christian parable. And the thing about the bullets not being able to touch the followers, that is something they tossed in to give it like a little mystical thing at the end. Like they're shooting at this boy who's running, who is one of Lalube's people, and the bullets don't hit him. But really, yeah, it's about Patrice Lamumba and the abuses of the Belgians in the Congo, which, you know, were just like the French and British abuses all over Africa. It's pretty disgusting what was done to Africa. So, let's talk about some of these people involved in this movie. This is quite a pedigree. By the way, the DVD is, you know, like I said, it looks nice. It's pretty sharp. It's like window boxed, not full letterboxed, but it's a good proportion. I don't know what the original aspect ratio was. It's a good print. It's not great, you know, but it definitely, it could massively benefit from a remastering, you know, 2K, 4K, whatever. I'm hoping some kind of boutique or prestige label like Criterion even might put it out. I think, you know, Criterion's put out Battle of Algiers. This has been compared to Pontecorvo's political movies like Burn with Marlon Brando, which I have never seen all the way through. Battle of Algiers by Pontecorvo, I have seen. It's brilliant. That's on Criterion. And also kind of reminds me of Z, a classic of that period, also directed by Costa Gavras, and Z is still not on Blu-ray yet either. I'm assuming that will get a prestige kind of Criterion or Kino Lorber release at some point. though no plans have been announced. Z is about a Greek guy who was a leader who was trying to improve everyone's lot in life. He was trying to promote benevolent socialism, and he was killed. And it was a conspiracy, and it was a massive conspiracy by the military to perform a coup and take over the government, kind of the way, you know, they tried to do in the movie 7 Days of May, written by Rod Serling. And they actually, between the military and the bankers and the between the oligarchs and the military industrial complex, of course, there were attempts to overthrow FDR, and they got Kennedy. They got both Kennedys. And people weren't too happy with stuff that Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were saying either, so they were gone too. And even the young Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers, killed at 21, but his words and his example still follow today, probably more than ever. His life was recently popularized in a film called Judas and the Black Messiah. Judas and the Black Messiah. So we come back to the same idea, because the guy who sold out Fred Hampton to the authorities was a fellow Black Panther. Now, these characters are played by Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, respectively, both of Get Out, which I also reviewed on this channel. Check it out. And of course, Daniel Kaluuya is a bit older than 21, but I think they wanted to strike while the iron was hot with the casting. I still haven't seen that movie, by the way. I have been following a great channel on here called Fred Hampton Leftists for a couple of years now, about a year and a half. They've been around about a year and a half. And a few months ago, they changed their name to Revolutionary Blackout Network, and of course, they've got the power to the people symbol is theirs, and they're in one of my very favorite political channels on YouTube, one of my very favorite channels on YouTube, and the commentators are people who I think they're constantly coming up with great ideas on how to push back against this decaying empire and help us, the people. And that's what Lamumba was trying to do in the Congo. Get the soldiers out, get the people, fed, give them a decent way of life. Of course, years later, Muammar Gaddafi had the same goal and nearly achieved it. He had the most prosperous country in Africa, Libya. They had free health care, which we don't have. He was going off the gold standard. I think he had his own gold. He was going off the dollar and anything related to Western financial systems. He achieved a lot, but then he was cooed by Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, and by her own confession on camera multiple times, she had him murdered. So, yeah, that didn't work out either. I don't know enough about Gaddafi to say he was a left-winger, but obviously he was at least good to his people, and he was trying to do great things, and he achieved more materially for his people than anybody that I can think of in the history of modern Africa. And he, look what he got for his troubles. I'm saying all this because Lamumba, the real guy, was part of a lineage of this, and I don't think I don't want to shy away from the fact this movie was a powerful statement made during the 60s when these guys were dropping like flies, who were trying to help everyone out and, make things more liberal by the old definition, not the current, for everybody. It was in the air. There was a shift in human consciousness worldwide transpiring, and it was a shot for mankind to maybe ascend, to a higher level of consciousness and eschew the evils of imperialism. Unfortunately, it might have been our last real shot, but we'll see what happens. But it's known as that period. And so it produced a lot of films like the Pontecorvo films, the Castagavras films, and Valerio Zurlini's films. Now, I haven't seen any of his other films except The Camp Followers with Anna Karina and Tomas Milian, and the great Melina Dravic from Dusan Makaveyev's W.R. Mysteries of the Organism. She doesn't pop up in a lot of movies from that period. Camp Followers was on Amazon Prime. I liked it a lot. It had a cool vibe to it. I think it was black and white, if I'm correct. You correct me if I'm wrong. So I want to see more Zarlini, though. His other movies have kind of plots that, from what I'm reading, I'm not as interested in, but I definitely would give them a shot. It brought to my attention. So, this film, the original Italian title was Seduto alla sua destra, sitting to his right. That is an allusion to Judas in the painting The Last Supper, Jesus's final meal and the position of his betrayer. So, from my shock cinema thing, we've already talked about who betrayed him. Basically, these Belgian soldiers try to find him, and then this guy gives him the note. You know, this guy in a white robe whose face is hidden at first, and they take the mask down. You don't know who he is, but he is a young black man, one of Lalube's own people, and for some money, I think, pittance, he 100,000 francs. I said, he reveals Lalube's location where he's been kind of, preaching to people and talking, and it is kind of like biblical parables. And the guy who did the dubbing for Woody Strode, it's sort of close to Woody Strode's real voice, but not quite. It's very soothing, calm. It's one of those characters that's very firm and full of compassion. I know all roads lead to comic books for me, sorry. But I think Patrick Stewart's Professor Charles Xavier exudes that kind of leadership. And of course, he was, at least the film version of Professor Xavier was himself, meant to be a allegory to these kind of leaders like, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, etc. The Magneto is more the Malcolm X analog. So it's like, why are they going to torture this guy? But they are, because he won't sign this form, which is basically signing away his freedom, and he refuses to do it. And so he's left in the cell with this soldier Oreste, played by Franco Arcali, like I said, and they torture him. They pound nails through his hands. It's pretty excruciating. And Oreste asked for a little bit of oil, like linseed oil or something, and he puts them on Lalube's hands, and bandages them, and he tries to show compassion to this guy. He's a white guy, he's a soldier, but he's considered a dissident, and his encounter with Lalube is obviously like life and soul changing, and he tries to help him. It is very much like Jesus and being crucified or stabbed by the spear of destiny in the side. But yeah, he tries to salve his wounds with the oil. And this other really cynical dissident white guy, like, kicks the oil over and it falls, and Oreste's like trying to get it off the concrete, and he kind of believes, I think, by the end that the son of destiny, as he's sometimes called, Maurice Lalube, the analog of Patrice Lamumba, is a savior of sorts. Maybe that he has some divine power, or at the very least, he's an example. He leads and lives by example, which I think, was kind of supposed to be at one time a Christian tenet. It seems to have been lost over a long period of time, and corruption. Yeah, and finally they like take him to his fate, and Oreste, advocates for him, and it's just too late. The commander is played by Jean Servet, who was a Belgian actor himself, and his main lieutenant is played by Pier Paolo Caponi. So I want to talk a little bit about this incredible pedigree of these nice people who made this film. I mean, I'm assuming they're nice people. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. Some of them are dead now. Zarlini, I spoke a little bit about him, and I only know a little bit. I have read reviews of this film that state all of his movies are brilliant. Like I said, I don't know. I've heard of his movie Indian Summer from 1972. I have a burnt copy of a 1972 film called Indian Summer I got from rareloss.com. I downloaded and burnt 300 films in 2019. In the fits of my depression, while I was putting my Flickr Street studio together, I shelled out the money, and it was worth it. You know, just buying the cases, the blank DVDs, those little bit of software. I burnt 300 films. Well, some short films too, so more than 300. 300 DVDs, and it came to a total cost of 75 cents a movie. So 75 cents a movie for 300 hard-to-find movies. So think of how many thousands of dollars I'd spend if I bought DVDs or Blu-rays. So, you know, they're almost free. You know, less than it would cost to watch them on Amazon Prime for Amazon for streaming if it wasn't a Prime title, or just about anywhere for streaming. I mean, those prices are ridiculous. YouTube does it too. $4.99 just to see a movie on YouTube that you may hate. Now, remember the old days when we used to go to video stores like Cockbuster and pay like $3.50 to see one of them for like 3 days, and then they'd start hitting us with fines. And that was in the 1990s when the cost of living was much lower, the economy was somewhat better. I mean, $3.50 went a lot farther away, man, but, you know, not at Cockbuster. You know, they were like, damn, man, we're highway robbers. You know, so, you know, a lot of us started going to the mom and pops stores, and a lot of times they had to charge $2.50 because, you know, they had to stay in business and compete. But anyway, Netflix kind of stuck it to Cockbuster, and they fell like a lumbering giant. Well deserved. However, they did serve their function in the culture. You know, they were a gateway drug to me for all this stuff. Even though I was spending that kind of money, at least I was making more money for the, you know, compared to the cost of living than I am now. Sadly, I've been in decline rather than an incline. So, yeah, let's talk about some other people who worked in this movie. Well, Woody Strode, of course, was a legend. The other film that he really starred in as the title character, but he wasn't. He was like fifth or sixth billed, and he didn't get as much screen time as he should have. But he was the title character in Sergeant Rutledge, and I have seen about half of that movie. It was really good. I believe it was John Ford. I think my friend Bill White, who loves John Ford, will probably get really mad at me for not knowing that right offhand. My apologies. But I did like Sergeant Rutledge, and it was fairly progressive racially for its time. It's like, you know, it's like a black soldier, I guess during the Civil War era, who was accused, I think, he was accused of, I think, raping a white woman, so he goes to trial, and he didn't do it. But Strode has appeared in, you know, he was in a lot of spaghetti, well, he's in a couple of spaghetti westerns. He was very memorable in a role with no dialogue. He appeared in a lot of roles with no dialogue, just using his great physical presence. He was very tall and extremely muscular, even way into his 60s. But yeah, he was in Spartacus. He wrestled with Kirk Douglas, and he was one of these three grim gunfighters at the beginning of Once Upon a Time in the West. He has a great role as George in Keoma. A kind of a mentor to the character Keoma, played by Franco Nero. And we'll get back to Keoma in a minute. This movie connects up with Keoma and several other films by way of its talent. And there are films that I've seen and enjoy, so it's interesting, the connections. But yeah, Strode was all over the place. Later on, he was in Vigilante by William Lustig, because Lustig loved him so much. That's my favorite William Lustig film by far. I mean, I like Maniac, but I love Vigilante, and basically he saves Robert Forster from being raped in prison and beats the living fuck out of these guys. And he was getting up there in the years then. Uh, so yeah, Strode was in a ton of movies. The Professionals by Richard Brooks, another great Western. He played this archer, half Indian, half black archer, and I've forgotten the character. The character had a really fucking cool name too. I forgot what it was. But I haven't upgraded that to Blu-ray. I had it and sold it on my eBay channel, eBay store. Which you guys should visit my eBay store and buy a lot of stuff, because I'm broke, man. So, so that's Woody Strode. I mean, you know, I think most cult film or classic film people at least know who he is. And he was acting in a time when black people didn't have a lot of really plum roles, and he kind of took what he could get. He played in a lot of like Tarzan like movies. I think he was in a couple of Tarzan movies proper. Maybe the ones with Gordon Mitchell, or was Gordon Mitchell Tarzan? I'm getting them all confused. Lex Barker, no. The guy in the late 50s who did a pretty decent series of Tarzan movies. I believe Strode was in at least one of those, playing an African chieftain or something. You know, so he would play these kind of ethnic roles of different countries. Like here, he's playing an African. But I think he was in a Ecclesia Teji, and I can't remember the name of it, a Eurocrime film. So he got some work in Europe, like a lot of people in the 70s who were getting older, who weren't getting the work in Hollywood, and Europe opened up avenues for them. And not just the ones who were getting like really older, who were turning to that avenue. There were a lot of those, but also the ones who couldn't quite break in America. And of course, the two that really, you know, are obvious ones are both spaghetti Western superstars from Leone. Clint Eastwood was broken in Italy in A Fistful of Dollars. And then a few years later, Leone starred Charles Bronson in Once Upon a Time in the West. And he became huge. I mean, not many people know this, but he was around 1972. Charles Bronson was the highest. I'm not sure if he was the highest paid, but he was the biggest box office draw in Europe. He was the top star, but he still had not broken in America, even though people knew him from The Great Escape and all these 60s movies and television. He was a perennial, but he wasn't a superstar like he was over there. And then came Death Wish, and at the age of 50, let me see if I make sure I get this age right. 53, he became a superstar, and then it got bigger and bigger as he got older and older. I love Bronson. So anyway, so yeah, let's talk about these three other guest stars here. Jean Servais, like I said, was Belgian also. He was in a number of noteworthy films. Rififi by Jules Dassin in 1955. And I really like Dassin's movies. I like his, I'm not saying his name right. I think he's French, Jules Dassin. I don't know. I've seen some of his crime films, and then I did a great blaxploitation film called Uptight, which I have on Blu-ray, and he's just a classy director. And Rififi is a really iconic heist film. Jean Servais was in an obscure Buñuel film called Republic of Sin, the English translation, 1959. It looks like it was one of Buñuel's late Mexican era films, so it has a lot of French people associated with it. I guess it maybe was a co-production. Of course, Buñuel worked in Spain and then Mexico and then France. Later on in his career, Servais was in some cult movies and some small parts in some big Hollywood movies. He was in The Longest Day. He was in The Devil's Nightmare. He's in Marat Sade. Say No More. And then there's Pier Paolo Capone. He's kind of an asshole character in this. He's Servais, at least, you know, he tries to play this Belgian general as sympathetic as he can. And he has this kind of philosophical discussion with Lalube, where he's trying to force him to sign, and yeah, he seems like he's trying to reason with him, but really, it's one of those things where you get to a certain point in the scene, in the conversation, and you're like, oh, he really does have some sympathy. If the guy will just sign, he'll do anything for this guy. He's really not a racist. And maybe that's true. That's really just good writing, trying to make an unsympathetic character more sympathetic and an actor. But really, he's trying to take everything from Lalube, and if Lalube doesn't obey, he's just gonna fucking kill him, and that's what he does. So Capone's his right-hand man. Capone was in a lot of noteworthy roles. He played in some giallos, Forbidden Photos of a Lady Above Suspicion, Seven Bloodstained Orchids, and Cat o' Nine Tails, my favorite, which I've also reviewed on this channel. I mean, it's my favorite giallo. Seriously. I mean, everyone hates it. Even Argento, who made it, hates it, but it's my favorite. Capone was also in Naked Violence, Mafia Connection, and Defeat of the Mafia of Luzio Tecci. Eurocrime films of note. And finally, we get to Franco Arcali, who played Oreste, the soldier who tries to help Lalube. Now, this guy was a Pierpolo Pasolini standby. He was like one of his major forces in his repertory of actors. He was the actor he used the most, at least the most times and most prominently. But he appeared in Acatone, where he played Acatone. He played in Mama Roma. He appeared in Oedipus Rex, where he played Oedipus. That needs to be on Blu-ray, if it's not coming out. Pasolini's are kind of trickling into. I reviewed Teorema on this channel. That's one of the few Franco is not in, but he was in For Chile, another one that really needs to be on Blu-ray. And then he was in all three of the trilogy of Life films, Canterbury Tales, the Decameron, the Arabian Nights, all like kind of your legends, fairy tales, whatever, told in a very bawdy way. They were all X-rated. I have a beautiful release that Criterion put out on Blu-ray that the first time I ever did the Barnes & Noble twice a year half-off sale of Criterion items. That was one of the things I got because it was a box set. It was a little more expensive, so I wanted to get it at half off. I've watched each of those once. I think I used to have the Decameron on DVD, the old MGM DVD. I sold that a while back. So I have the Trilogy of Life. The extras are great. It's one I'll revisit, no doubt. Yeah, I love Pasolini. He's one of my very favorite filmmakers. Easily in my top 10. Franco Arcali also played in some notable Eurocrimes like Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man by Ruggero Deodato, one called Destruction Force. Like just about every other Italian or Italian American on the planet, he had a small part in The Godfather. And he was in some spaghetti westerns, Requiescant, and the great title, Kill Them All and Come Back Alone. Just love that title. Let's talk about some of the crew here. This is really cool. Alace Parolin was the DP. I was going to say district. The director of photography. He did some crime films, A Minute to Pray, A Second to Die, and The Sicilian Connection. He also shot two very noteworthy films. One was Kioma with Woody Strode, and one was the very sublime Baba Yaga by Corrado Farina, which I'm pretty sure I have the Blue Underground Blu-ray. I might embarrass myself. If I don't, I should. It's another of my favorite films, and one eventually I'd like to one I'd like to review on here. Also based on a famous comic book, famous in France, where it was conceived and published. Guido Crépin's Valentina. Baba Yaga was the witch, based on the real life, but the legendary Russian witch. So that's the character. She's like the antithesis, antagonist, foil of Valentina in the film, and she enchants her camera. Valentina's a photographer who's very into erotic photography, and she's very horny. It's very toned down in the movie. I mean, it's really cool, but it's very The cinematic techniques are very much like fumetti, the Italian comic books of the time, um, like Diabolic, which I've talked about a lot on this channel, and Killing, Satanic, and that kind of stuff. Uh, but this was French, and Crépin's stuff was pretty amazing. He even appears in the film. Isabelle de Funes, a really incredible singer from the French Yeye Girl period. She sings my very favorite Yeye song ever, La Journée de Isabelle, which I've probably played way too many times. And I translated the lyrics into English, and they're really kind of just not really about anything. But she sings them with a lot of conviction, and I love the French language. Um, I'd like to thank my #1 French viewer fan, Wanda Vartan, aka Wanda Almachian. I'm saying your last name wrong. Love you. Thank you for following me and all the support. You're incredible. Because I sent her that song recently. She's probably already heard it. But yeah, Valentina was a very sexually explicit comic book. Baba Yaga is not a sexually explicit movie, but it does have sex and eroticism and action and supernatural stuff. And Carol Baker plays Baba Yaga, and George Eastman, Luigi Montefiore, the famous George Eastman, plays Valentina's boyfriend. Great film, and this guy Perolin shot it, and it's beautiful, just like this film is beautiful, and I wish this would be handled with the treatment that Keoma and Baba Yaga have received on Blu-ray. So let's go to this. I think the last guy we're going to talk about has quite a resume. Franco Arcali, he's the editor of this film. Arcali was interesting. He was an editor and a writer, and he started out as an actor. He was in Visconti's Senso in the 50s. He worked a lot with Bertolucci and Antonioni, and he worked on a lot of important films, major films. One of the earliest films, it looks like he edited and I think helped write, was this Italian drama by Tinto Brass from 1963. I'd never heard of it. It has no English title, and I forgot to write down the name. Sorry. I never heard of it till today. I didn't know Brass had one that early that he directed. Arcali, right before he died, had co-written Once Upon a Time in America for Leone. But yeah, his career as a writer is fascinating. He wrote or co-wrote these films. Giulio Questi's Arcana and Giulio Questi's Django Kill If You Live Shoot with Tomas Milian. I don't know if I've reviewed that on this channel or not. I have the Blu-ray of that too. That's an incredible spaghetti western. A very surreal kind of film that I almost feel like it definitely anticipated El Topo, even if it didn't directly influence it. Arcali also wrote Death Laid an Egg by Giulio Questi. Another favorite that I have on Blu-ray too. And yet another I have on Blu-ray that I have reviewed for this channel, Last Tango in Paris. Arcali co-wrote. Now, as an editor, he also worked on some of those films and others. He worked on Bertolucci's 1900 as a writer and editor. He also worked as an editor on Antonioni's The Passenger, Liliana Caviani's Night Porter, which I have reviewed on here on Blue. His Pity She's a Whore. I have a burnt copy of that. I should do an extreme forgotten one of that. That's a fine, wild film. The aforementioned Arcana, the aforementioned Last Tango in Paris, Bertolucci's great film, The Conformist, Antonioni's Zabriskie Point, the anthology film Spirits of the Dead, the aforementioned Django Kill If You Live Shoot, and a really idiosyncratic giallo called Kill the Fatted Calf and Roast It. I do have one more guy. Ivan Bandor did the music, and he also did he also do Kill the Fatted Calf and Roast It? I thought I wrote that one down twice. You know, maybe I'm imagining it. You don't forget a title like that very, very easily. Yeah, Pier Paolo Capone, who I forgot to mention, he acted in that film. Anyway, Ivan Vandor did the music, and again, there's crossovers. He did the music to Django Kill, which is awesome, eerie, and he did the music to The Passenger, and uh, I really think they should have used the Iggy Pop song "The Passenger," which I believe was out around the same time as the Passenger film. But I always think when I hear the song, I think of the movie. When I see the movie, I think of the song. Great movie with Jack Nicholson and Maria Scheider. And finally, Ivan Vandor was a member of an avant-garde jazz group called Grupo de Improvisazione de Nueva Constanza, and that is not new to me. I first heard them in the late 90s, early 2000s. Ennio Morricone was a member. I have their two, I think they did two records. I have them both downloaded. And they're quite good. It was weird. It's weird hearing Morricone do improvisational stuff because later in his life he claimed that improvisational music was not real music, and that a real musician, a real composer composes everything in his head. He hears it in his head, and then he writes down the notations, without playing anything. And I'm like, yeah, brilliant people like you can do that, but not all of us are fucking Mozart or Beethoven, man. So, because that alone would invalidate quite a lot of rock musicians that have done great material. um, so that's the deal on this movie. I love the movie. I think it's powerful. It's heavy. The torture scene is difficult to watch. It's not extremely graphic, but it's rough. Rob Zombie wishes his nailing through the hands, which is gruesome in itself, in The Devil's Reject, was half as wince-inducing as the scene in this film, but that would require that you are made to sympathize as much with Otis Driftwood as you are Maurice Lalube. And some people I know do. I kind of dissed Bill Moseley and Otis Driftwood in my last video, and I know the Rob Zombie fans, of which I'm not one, are going to hate me. I do love The Devil's Rejects. I've seen it in theater. I think it's a great contemporary horror film. It has flaws, but it fused together well. It moves really fast. It has a cool vibe. I've met Sid Haig a few times. He signed a copy for me. It's just Moseley, I think, is beating that shtick kind of to the ground. But as far as yeah, as far as his character being sympathetic to Otis Driftwood, no, I don't think so. I think he's an asshole. I like to see him suffer. So, but I think that's the whole deal. When he takes these characters and makes them the main characters. So, and then he makes the sheriff insane also. So there's layers there. But in Three from Hell, you're supposed to think Baby and Otis and the new cat played by Richard Brake are cool as hell, man, and badass. And I don't. I think I wish they'd all died, which they really did die at the end of that movie. But Rob's like, nah, man, I want one more with them. So anyway, back to this classic Black Jesus. I'm pretty sure it's on Tubi, free to watch on streaming. I think it's a similar print to this. Might be a little cleaner. I watched a couple minutes of it. But I would definitely check it out. I highly recommend this film. And it's one that I've been into, obviously, for fucking 25 years. So I've seen it way too many times. But I never get enough of it. The vibe of it is, you get lost in it. It's kind of hypnotic and sublime. So anyway, I don't want to go over 45 minutes, guys. So thank you to channel patrons Tim Tolbert, Shelly Druckery, Drew Dahmer. If you want to be a channel patron, purchase me some items to review. It can be a ticket to a movie playing. It can be a Blu-ray on Amazon. It could be a book. It could be, anything you want me to review. I just can't afford to buy anything at all, really, in my life. So I'm depending on patronage. I'm a very small channel, but I am growing. My views are starting to get up there, and my subscribers are gradually increasing in number. So please like this, smash that like, and if you haven't subscribed, somewhere here in a second, you'll have little links to subscribe, and the video before this, which was about Dark August and Prisoners of the Ghostland, and the next video to come, which I'm not sure what it's going to be yet. I do have a super special in mind, but I don't want to say anything else about it. So take care. Thanks a lot.